We're asking the question, how does serving grow my trust in Jesus? Some point in your journey, here's what's going to happen, is that God will often ask you to do something beyond your what? Your ability. I don't know how else to say it, but that's just the way it rolls. When you have a relationship with Jesus, Jesus will just ask you to do something that is beyond your ability. This is part of the trust growing factor. God will often ask you to do something beyond your ability. Now, it could be something simple. It might be something a little more complicated. But at that moment, whenever you feel that nudge, you and I, we have a decision to make. And the decision is, am I going to trust God, or am I going to make excuses for why it can't be done? Am I going to trust God, or am I going to make excuses for why it can't be done? Now, unfortunately, you can't marry the two of those. And when you do, usually that just doesn't end well. So it's just almost better to just, if you don't want to do what God's asking you, just keep making excuses. That didn't sound very pastoral, did it? It didn't even sound very biblical, did it? Which is why you might as well just give in and just trust. Just trust God. Because everyone who's ever been following Jesus for any amount of time has been faced with that exact crossroads. And it probably started with something really, really simple and small. And at the time, maybe it didn't seem that simple. Maybe it seemed monstrous at the moment. But as you look back, here you are some years later, and you look back on that and you say, yeah, that was a step. It was a big step for me. I didn't want to do that, but it was a step. And in the process, you learned to trust Jesus, and your faith grew. But at the time, it was beyond your ability. Now, most likely, whatever it is that God is asking you to do, it will involve other people, okay? Specifically in the area of serving other people. Oftentimes, what happens is that God will use our past experiences to cause us to want to serve other people as a means to empathize with them. For example, you may have experienced a traumatic event when you just kind of became sensitive to those things, and you see the signs of all of that, and you see people, and your heart just kind of goes out to those individuals because you know exactly where they've been. It might have been a childhood experience where maybe you recognize some of those signs as a child, and you see those signs in other children, and your heart breaks for them, and God is just nudging you, hey, you've been a little further along on the journey than that child. Why don't you do something to work with children in that regard? And maybe when you needed help, and you didn't know what to do, but through the process of that, you didn't have any resources, but you learned some skills, and you learned a few things along your own journey that maybe when you see somebody else who needs a hand, you can come alongside of them and share your experience with them and give them some wisdom that you've learned. Okay? So God oftentimes uses our past experiences to cause us to want to serve other people. But God will also use, lack of a better word, your passions in life. Now, how many of you got some passions? How many of you are sitting next to them right now? No, don't ask that question. How many of you just got some things that you just love to do? Okay, maybe you like to fish, or you like to ride motorcycles. Okay, you like to cook, you like to barbecue, you like to motorsports, whatever it is. Okay, here's the thing I want you to understand is that God oftentimes uses our passions and things that we like to begin to serve other people. In fact, at our church, what we call this is we have an acronym. It's called ACGs, and it just really stands for Authentic Community Groups. And where this is just an activity where people come together who have similar like-mindedness. They want to ride some motorcycles. They want to ride quads. They want to go fishing. They want to build crafts. They want to cook food or an outdoor activity and go hiking somewhere. The hiking part isn't me, but other people. Okay, and so you use this passion and you invite people to come, and along your journey, along your evening, along this activity, you just begin to talk about life, and you're beginning to build friendship, and you begin to help one another and encourage one another. So you see, that's an act of serving, and God uses that oftentimes to cause us to trust Him. So when you think about it, this is exactly why things happen at church all around the world. Doesn't matter what church you go to, is that people found other people that they like and have similar interest in, and they begin to do things together, and they begin to invite their friend and connect with others, whether it be at crafts or game nights or the foodies or motorcycles, or they use their shop and their tools and their resources. Here's the thing, is eventually my point is that God will ask you to do something beyond your ability, beyond your resources, beyond your comfort zone. And it could be something that involves your past experience, could be something that you're currently passionate about or you're gifted with or a resource that you may have. Whatever it is, I just want to encourage you to fight. Just fight against making excuses to God of why you can't. Because the whole point is to learn to trust Him. Because He will ask you to do something that is beyond your ability, and He does this to help you develop trust. Okay, here's the second observation. This one will go a little quicker. Is that Jesus asks us to use what we have. I love how the disciples try to enlighten Jesus with their weakness, as if Jesus doesn't already know, right? I mean, He's with them. He's been traveling with them. Look what they say. But we only have. Can't you just hear the whining? Jesus, can't you see? We only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Wah. And I can just hear Jesus saying, really? Huh. Well, I thought that you had a boatload of food that you shipped over from across the other side. I thought that there was a caravan of McDonald's tracking us. I thought you guys brought the barbecue. You mean to tell me you're not prepared? See, that's not what happens, is it? Now, that sounds kind of funny, but here's how it sounds in our world. Well, Jesus, what if they ask me some questions that I don't know how to answer? Well, Jesus, there's people in the church that are way smarter than me. They've been doing this a lot longer than me. Okay. I'm not sure I got any time for that. You know, there's people who can do a much better job at that than me. I'm not very organized. I'm the new person. I can't, I won't. I'm not smart enough. I need more time. I need more resources. Oh, and my personal favorite one that the pastor hears all the time. Hey, why don't you let me pray about that for a while? Yeah. And what you're really saying is, hey, why don't you let me pray about that forever? Okay? See, the reality is that Jesus expects us to use what we've been given. And He's given all of us something. And what you have is a story that nobody else has, a story that's very unique to you, a story of what you used to be like and how Jesus has changed your life. And quite frankly, quite honestly, that is way better than doing anything else, is just simply share your story. You don't have to have all the answers to their questions. You don't need to do anything else but just simply share your story. Now, I just have an opinion about this whole thing because I believe that Jesus asked the disciples to feed the crowd because He knew that they couldn't do it. That's just my thought. It's just my opinion. But that's the whole point of trusting God and a life of faith, is that the purpose of this miracle was not to demonstrate the cool kid thing and feed all these people from 5 loaves and 2 fish. Okay? But rather because if you think about it, the people they're just going to get hungry again, right? So the reality of it is that it wasn't really about feeding the crowd. Jesus isn't asking the disciples to provide a permanent solution to this issue. In fact, I just don't even think it's about the crowd, because the miracle was all about teaching the disciples to trust. And so he's asking the disciples, like we asked a few weeks ago, where is your faith? Where is your faith? Who do you trust? What are you going to believe in this moment? And so the prompting that you feel every once in a while to serve other people, it isn't just about those people. It's really about you. Because God is saying, listen, where is your faith and who will you trust? Now, some of you've got this idea that just won't leave you alone. I mean, it's this thing that just kind of continually just comes up. And for some of you, that thing has come up for so many years that it has just kind of become a distant, fading thing until the moment that I spoke about that. And some of you are thinking to yourself, okay, I got goosebumps right now, Pastor Brian. This is a little freaky. That is the Holy Spirit just trying to nudge you to trust. And our tendency is to fight against those things and hope that somebody else will take care of that, and somebody else will do that. But the reason that you feel that way is because God is saying to you, you feed them. Bring it here, and let's see what we can do together. Give me what you have, and let's see what happens. Because God never, ever, ever expects you to do things on your own. But he is expecting you to trust. He's expecting you to put your faith in him and to give him what you have. And that is when the miracle happens. We trust, God provides. Now, God wants to develop the kind of trust with you and the kind of relationship with you that you will just trust him no matter what he says. But the only way to develop that kind of relationship is to experience some situations and some scenarios that are a little bit unknown. And some of you like to plan so much, you like to organize so much that you literally just work the faith right out of your life. And Jesus is just saying, hey, you know what? Why don't you just trust me? Why don't you walk through a season with me where it's a little bit out of your comfort zone, a little bit out of your strength, a little bit out of your capacity, because in those times you're going to have to trust him. And you're going to have to trust in something. Jesus is hoping that it's him. Now, to use what you have, it may not seem like you have much. In fact, it may appear that you don't have near enough to do what needs to be done. You may have nothing more than a story and just this pipe dream that's kind of floating around out there somewhere, and that may be all you have. But you have this tug in your heart that's just saying, hey, why don't you trust? Why don't you try me? I just want to encourage you, just give that to Jesus, and let's experience a miracle. So, how do we apply all this to our life? That's such a great question. I'm glad that you asked. Now, I am not that smart, okay? There are people that are way better pastors than me. There are people that are way better communicators than me. There are people that are way smarter about the Bible than me, okay? I'm not a theologian. I'm just a Bible reader. And so there's people that are gifted far better than me in this area, okay? But here's the one thing in my life, if I've observed anything at all, this is the one thing about the life of faith that I would just pass along to you, okay? Is that usually when it comes to miracles usually don't happen unless I make the move first. Does that make sense? You see, God is waiting there for you, just like he's waiting there for me, to take a step, to make a move. And we could go on and on and on about hundreds of illustrations throughout the Bible where God told somebody, do this, then I. We could start with whenever the Egyptians are leaving Pharaoh. They're running for their lives and they come across this big, huge body of water and they don't know what to do. You know what God told them? The priests are to walk out and put their feet in the water. You know, sometimes you just got to get a little bit wet. Sometimes you might need to let that water rise a little bit before God begins to part the seas for you and allow you to walk through on dry ground. Now, I'm just communicating with you in love, okay? But sometimes the reason why we don't see miracles is because we're the ones who haven't taken a step. You with me? Okay, my name is Brian. I'm your friend. You know that I love you. Just take a step. Just take a step. Miracles usually don't happen unless I make the first move first and then trust God. Now, the question that we're going to conclude with today, and this is just a practical thing for you to ask yourself, is what do you have to give that Jesus can use? What do you have? You might be sitting here this morning just thinking, man, I don't have very much. The disciples didn't have enough to feed 5,000 people. Now, I'm not talking about money. Maybe it's money, but that's not what I'm talking about for you, okay? I think what God is asking you this question, what do you have to give me that I can use? Maybe you have a talent that you can share. Maybe it's some tools and some equipment or a skill, or you're just really gifted in certain things. And you could just begin to serve people in the community without charging them, just helping them out because you see a need. Maybe you're a good baker. My wife is a good baker, can you tell? She serves me in that area way too much. I got to tell her to cut back a little bit, okay? Maybe you like to bake goods, and maybe you can give some of that away to somebody who just needs a little bit of an encouragement. What about hospitality? Some of you have amazing homes, and you can just invite people out for whatever. But don't think that you have to have an amazing home, okay? You could live like a pauper. People don't care. They just want to come and be a part of you, okay? I got lots of stories about that, but today we don't have time. Some of you have this amazing story to tell, God's grace and his provision, and somebody is waiting. They're just waiting for some hope. All you got to do is share that. You know, what's interesting about the story that we read this morning is the disciples, they had no clue how Jesus was going to use those 5 loaves and the 2 fish. But that really wasn't their concern. Their job was to trust. And sometimes we get our job confused a little bit with Jesus' job. We tend to think that all the details have to be worked out before we begin, or we think that we got to have all the answers. We got to take all the risk out of things, and we're not sure that things are going to pan out quite the way we want them to. But I'm just here to tell you, that's not your concern. Your concern is to trust. So if that's you, I just want to say to you that Jesus is saying to you this morning, just bring that here. Bring that here to me. Just bring whatever you have. Even if you don't think it's much, let's just see what I can do with it when I bless it and hand it back to you. Okay? Now here's a thought, because every day we place our confidence in things that we don't understand. Some of you don't have a clue how a combustion engine works, and yet you relied on your car to get here this morning. Okay, just a thought. Okay. Most of us don't have any idea how the air conditioning works. but you walk over and you hit the button down and you enjoy the AC. Have you ever wondered how everyone in the city can walk over to their faucet and turn it on and you have water that comes out of that thing? Have you ever wondered that? That's weird things I think about, sorry, okay? Listen, we rely on things that we don't understand all the time. Listen to me. It is perfectly okay. It is perfectly natural to rely on God even when you don't understand him. Completely plausible, completely acceptable. You can trust him. And just because you don't understand how he can use your 5 loaves and your 2 fish, how he can take what little you have and multiply that and make something great of it, I just want you to know that doesn't make you any less of a person because you don't understand it. Okay? God works beyond your capacity. So the message this morning is just trust him. Just trust him. Let him have what you have. Give it to him and just trust him. So again, the question is what do you have to give to Jesus that he can use? Will you trust God with that? Or will you come over here and make some excuses? Are you going to place your faith in him, or are you going to choose not to believe? You might try to talk yourself out of it. Just trust. Just trust. I love the scripture found in Psalm 37 that says this: commit everything that you do to the Lord, trust him, and he will help you. So when we read the Bible and we observe all of the ways that God causes us to trust him and to look into his direction, serving other people, service, being involved in a church, being involved in your community, learning to serve other peoples is just another way that God helps us trust in him. Okay? So, what do you have to give? Jesus would just say, bring that here.